Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Rousseau's Social Contract. The previous day's snafu resolved itself. So we are back to our old way we did things. So I apologize for last video. Um, 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 I don't know, it was a glitch in Google Books. So here we are. Everything's dandy. Today we're looking at finishing book two of Social Contract. We're going to be looking at chapters 11 and 12. So let's go to it. Chapter 11 on the various systems of legislation. If one seeks to define precisely what constitutes the greatest good of all, one ought to one ought to one ought to be the greatest good of all, which ought to be the end of every system of legislation. One will find that it comes down to these two principles: freedom and equality. So, what is going to define the greatest good? It's going to be two principles: um, uh, um, uh, freedom and equality. Freedom because all private dependence is that much force subtracted from the body of the state, and equality because freedom cannot last without it. So this is the fundamental thing of freedom and equality, right? This is the two principles of every state, of every system of legislation. And he says that freedom because all private dependence is that much force subtracted from the body of the state, right? This is that sense, right? And equality because without freedom, because freedom cannot last without it in that sense. I have already said that what civil freedom is. Now, I talked about this, right? With regard to equality, this word must not be substituted to mean what degrees of power and wealth should be exactly the same. So, equality does not mean what degrees of power and wealth. It must not be understood this that equality in powers of wealth and that's exactly the same, but rather that with regard to power, that it should be incapable of all violence and never exerted without by virtue of status of the laws. So therefore, power can only be exercised in other words, that with regard to power, it can only be capable of all violence and never exerted except through a virtue of the status, by virtue of status and the law. So therefore, the state, in other words, the state should not involve. This is the idea that violence should not be tied to violence, and it should always be guided by law. Right? In regard to wealth, no citizen should be so opulent that he can buy another, and none so poor that he is constrained to sell himself. Right? This is the point. In other words, and I think this is the metaphor in that sense, that no so opulent that he can buy other people. Um, it's very problematic. I mean, I think this is the thing about what is meant by this, what is meant by selling and buying, right? Literally, or the metaphor of it. This presumes moderation in goods and influence on the part of the upper classes, and moderation in avarice and covetous on the part of the lower classes. And this is this dash here. Uh, uh, do you then want to give stability to the state? Bring the extremes as close together as possible. Tolerate neither opulent people nor beggars. These two conditions, naturally inseparable, are equally fatal to the common good. Again, this is right out of Aristotle's book 4, chapter 11, in that sense, right? From the one comes those who foment tyranny, and from the other tyrants. So the fomenting of tyranny is who's going to be that the fomenters from the one. Uh, 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 and then the others are tyrants, those who are what he says. the beggars, extreme conditions, the opulent, the wealthy, and the beggars. Both of these two conditions are inseparable and fatal to the common good. One comes to form tyrant and the other is tyrant. It is always between them that trafficking in the public freedom takes place. The one buys it and the other sells it. So therefore, this is the this is the danger of the rich and the extreme rich and the extreme poor. Again, this is very much reminiscent of Aristotle's book, again, Book 4, Chapter 11, and the question of the Meso, the dangers. And it shares the idea that the very poor is not to be trusted, they're dangerous, as the very rich and they're arrogant and was seeking to command, right? That's famous thing. So, this equality is said to be a speculative fantasy. This equality is said to be a speculative fantasy that cannot exist in practice. But if abuse is inevitable, does it follow that it must not at least be regulated? In other words, this idea of equality is a fantasy. But then again, if abuse is the very poor and the very rich, then regulate it. Needs to be regulated. It is precisely because the force of things always tend to destroy equality that the force of legislation should always tend to maintain it. So, in other words, the things, wealth and power and these things, the force of things will tend to destroy equality. Legislation should always do that. Everyone should be equal in the law. And I said there should always be the sense that the law benefits everyone and that no one is benefiting more than the other, right? In that sense, radical sense. But these general objects for all good objects of all good institutions should be modified in each country according to the relationship that arises as much from the local situation as from the character of the inhabitants. And it is on the basis of these relationships that each people must assign a particular system of must be assigned a particular system of institutions that is best, not perhaps in itself, but for the state for which it is intended. This is very interesting. Rousseau is giving qualifications. Rousseau is not this simple idealist, one system for all. He's suggesting that no, that even in this, the institutions of equality, it depends on the population. It depends as much on the local situation as from the character of the inhabitants. And it's on the basis of these relationships, the environment, the situation, the character of the inhabitants, that each people must be assigned what? A particular system of institutions that are best not for the system itself, not for the state itself, but for the state for which is intended. In other words, the idea of the particular situation, particular reality. This needs to be, again, this is far from the idea that Rousseau is a simple one, simple abstract system. No, Rousseau is giving something that's much less abstract than we look at this. More, and in fact, I think in many ways he is giving more to local context than Hobbes and Locke does in that sense. And this is what's interesting in this sense. Because I just had two dentists today, so my tooth's painful. So it's like, for inhabitants, for example, okay, is the soil unprofitable and barren, or the country too small for its inhabitants? So the examples of this, right? In other words, if the soil is unprofitable and barren, can't produce, or the country is too small for its inhabitants. Turn to industry and the arts, the products of which can be engaged for foodstuffs you lack. On the contrary, do you have rich plains and fertile hillsides? Do you lack the inhabitants on good terrain? Apply all your efforts to agriculture, which multiplies men and chases out the arts, which would merely complete the country's, which would completely deplete the country's depopulation, concentrating its small numbers of inhabitants in few locations. Okay, now this is like any type of foreign commerce, says the Marquis de Argenson. Ever say this? Marquis de Argenson creates almost nothing but a deceptive utility for a kingdom in general. It can enrich some private individuals, even some towns, but the whole nation gains nothing from it, and the people and the people is not better off because of it. This is that line here. This is note 64. I'll read this from the note. This is from the first edition. In the first edition, Rousseau referred to the author only by the ignition. Right. This is the name was added throughout the posthumous editions of 1782. Here, the published text of Diagon's work read, "The branch of commerce acquired at great expense only secures a deceptive utility for the kingdom in general, and enriches only some towns and private individuals that are not already living in abundance." Yes. So, so do you inhabit extensive, convenient shores? So in other words, again, these examples. He says, uh, 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 um, your land does not do it. You don't have enough. You have too many people. In other words, right? Go back here. You lack foodstuffs, right? On the contrary, in other words, unprofitable land and barren country is too small, right? Well, turn the arts. And if you have rich plans in this, turn to agriculture. Um, do you have extensive convenient shores? Cover the sea of ships. Cultivate commerce and navigation. You will have a brilliant and brief. You will have a brilliant and brief existence. In other words, because commerce and trade will be brilliant and brief. Is your coast merely a place where the sea meets almost invariably rocks? Remind barbarian and fish eaters, you will live more peacefully, better perhaps, and surely more happily. Again, very negative on commerce, right? It's a commerce will always corrupt your morals and things like this, right? In short, apart from the maxims common to all, each people contains within itself some causes that organize it in a particular manner and renders its legislation appropriate for it alone. So it's something about the people and the place, right? People, something about the people. So apart from maxims common to all people, right? A particular people have something very specific towards it that organizes it and renders its legislation appropriate for it alone. Thus, the Hebrews long ago and the Arabs recently have had their have had religion as a principal object. The Athenians letters, Carthage entire commerce, Rhodes navigation, Sparta war, Rome virtue. The authors of the Spirit of the Laws has given large number of examples of these arts by which legislature directs the institutions and towards each of these objects. Right? This idea here that we're talking about. So each one of these specific things, people has a specific characteristic and trait. Right? He gives here. Let's go to 65. Montesquieu had written, although all states have in general the same objects, which is to survive, each state nonetheless has one that is particular to itself. Expansion was that of Rome, war of Sparta. So notice that Montesquieu says expansion for Rome. Rousseau here says virtue. That's interesting. Religion, that of the Jews, commerce of Martials, public tranquility of that of the laws of China, navigation of the laws of Rhodes, natural liberty and of the regulations of savages. In general, the delights of the prince and that of monarchies, and independence of each individual is the object of the laws of Poland, which is the result of the oppression of all. The Spirit of the Laws, Book 6, Chapter 5. While a number of previous editors have noted this parallel, the difference between Rousseau and Montesquieu are worth considering, especially with compared to Rome. Right? Again, notice that. Here, Rome is virtue, and there that. Compare social contract, editorial note 61 here in that sense. Again, to Aristotle's Politics, right? This is that 61, the Aristotle's Politics, book 7, right? It says paragraphs 7 to 11 are in the original version of this chapter. Note sentence in the first chapter was deleted. One explanation may be that the last paragraph of this chapter seems to refer to Republican Rome, which Montesquieu described as its endless and constant violent wars, by the very principle of that government. Montesquieu's consideration of the greatness of Rome. Given Rousseau's praise of Rome, he may have decided that one could indeed imagine something more foolish than the maxim of those conquering nations, for whom the necessary conquest was part of their constitution. Right. So again, Rome. This is why he's like I said, Sparta is for him maybe better, but Sparta has issues. Rome, Republican Rome, is like this, and this is why he's kind of like. He talks now about the virtue that of the emperor. You think of Marcus Aurelius, and the Stoics, not of the Republic. So that's a very interesting. Ouch! I'm sorry. Last paragraph. The constitution of the state is made truly solid and enduring when matters of expediency are so well satisfied that natural relationships and the laws always agree on the same points. And the latter only secures, accompany, and rectify, so to speak, the former. So notice this is very interesting. The constitutional states, right, are made this and that when what? Matters of expediency are so well satisfied that natural relationships and the laws always agree on the same points. So natural relationships and the laws agree because of expediency, right? And therefore, and the latter, the laws, only secure, accompany, and rectify the former natural relationships, so to speak. But if the legislature makes a mistake about his objective and adopts a different principle from the one arising from the nature of things, whether one tends towards servitude or the other, and the other towards freedom, one towards wealth and the other towards population growth, or one towards peace and the other towards conquest, the laws will imperceptibly weaken, and the constitution will be altered, and the state will not cease being agitated until it is either destroyed or changed. And invincible nature has regained its dominion. In other words, nature will assert itself. If the laws aren't in harmony with the nature of things, the laws will undermine, they'll collapse, they'll conquer, the constitution will be altered, and the state will not cease being agitated until it is either destroyed or changed, right? So that to make it conformity with its nature. So here, the nature of people is can be more a thing than laws. Laws must be in harmony with it. If the laws are not in harmony with the nature of the people. So Rousseau seems to suggest that laws are not, that in other words, the laws themselves are not as plastic. In other words, you can't really make things. What you're getting a sense here is that the laws are not really cannot, the laws can't reshape human behavior, human nature in that sense. That human nature and the nature of things, the reality of situation, the reality of a people and their nature and their character, it's that can change situations, the environment, things like this can change it. But the laws, it's going to be difficult because what happens is that the nature will always wage war with the laws. And what will happen is that the system of laws will collapse, right? And the invincible nature has regained its dominion. So either changed or destroyed or changed. Now, chapter 12, classification of laws. Various relations has to be considered in order to recognize the whole or give the Commonwealth the best possible form. Again, 67. Again, no. I think that's going to be just a note to. Yeah, this is a note about the Geneva chat because comparing what is said here than the later part. He goes that Rousseau refers to Book 3, Chapter 1, as Dorothy points out in the notes, played volume 3. Rousseau goes on to modify Montesquieu's distinction between uh, 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 droit politique and droit civil law, and political law and civil law, right? Civil right and political right. In the Spirit of Laws, Book 1, Chapter 3. On the importance of mores, the French word is mores, which mean the customs, morals, and ways of life of people, which Rousseau emphasizes in the last paragraph of the chapter of this, in that sense. Okay, so let's go look at this. This is the mores. So various relations have to be considered in order to organize the whole and view this. First, the action of the entire body acting upon itself. That is the relationship of the whole to the whole, or of the sovereign to the state. And this relationship is composed of the relationship and intermediate terms, as we shall see later. So therefore, so the first situation is that in order to do this, in other words, various relations have to be considered to organize the whole or give the Commonwealth its best possible form, right? The first, the action of the entire body acting on itself. That is the relationship of the whole to the whole, or the sovereign to the state, right? And this relationship is composed of the relationship of intermediary terms, as we said. The law that regulates this relationship are named political laws. Okay, this is why Masters says he flips it. He flips Montesquieu here, and are called fundamental laws, without a degree of reason if these laws are wise. So therefore, the political laws are these fundamental laws. They're not concerned with the wise. They are the relationship of the relationship, the whole to the whole, the whole to the whole, the sovereign to the state. Right. For if these, for if there, sorry, I had these. For if there is only one correct way to organize each state, the people that has found it should abide by it. So therefore, if there's only one way, they should abide by it. Political reality. But if the established order is bad, why should one accept as fundamental laws that prevent it from being good? Right. So therefore, this general principle here, you know, you know, you should just see, do what it says. There's no argument to reason with it. Right. There's no um, nor without a degree of reason if these laws are wise, right? In that sense. But if the established law is bad, why should one accept it as fundamental law that prevents it from being good? Besides, in any event, a people is always the master to change its laws, whatever the people are, even the best laws. For if it wishes to do, for if it wishes to do itself harm, who has the right to prevent it from doing so? Right. This idea that this is that point that they have the right, that they are the ultimate determiner. They are the ultimate sayers. And if they want to do themselves harm, it's their choice. That is their thing. The second relation is that of the members to each other, or to this entire body. Right. So therefore, the original is the whole to the whole. Here is that each member to each other, or the entire body. And this relationship should be as small as possible with respect to the former, and as large as possible with respect to the latter. So each to each, the small as possible, and to each to the whole, the larger body as large as possible, right? With respect to the latter. And so that each citizen is in a position of perfect independence from all the others and of excessive dependence on the city. So, in other words, that the relationship should be as small as possible to each. There's no situation where one is dependent on the other one, or significantly dependent or controlled by, or in that sense. But therefore, the one is, but to the city, they're dependent radically on the city. This is always achieved by the same means, because only the force of the state creates the freedom of its members. So, in other words, the state guarantees the freedom. The force of the state. The force of the state is that thing that guarantees, that creates the freedom of its members. It is from this second relationship that civil laws arise. So again, this is that flip in Montesquieu, right? This is what was for Montesquieu civil. What was civil was that formation of the civil body versus the thing goes. We flip it, right? It is possible to consider a third type of relation between man and the law, namely that of disobedience and penalty. And this gives rise to the establishment of criminal laws, which are basically not so much particular types of law as a sanction of all others. Right? To these three types of laws, it is added a fourth, the most important of all, which is not engraved in marble or bronze, but on the hearts of the citizen, which is the true constitution of the state, which gains fresh force each day, which, when other laws die or age or die out, relies or replaces them, and preserves a people in the spirit of its institution, and imperceptibly substitutes the force of habit for that of authority. I'm speaking of mores, customs, and especially of opinion. A part of the law is unknown to our political theorists, but on which the success of all others depend. A part, okay, so therefore it is what's just stop here. That this fourth thing is what mores. I'm speaking of mores, customs, and a special opinion. A part of the law is unknown to our political theorists, but on which the success of all others depend. A part to which the great legislature attends in secret while appearing to limit himself to the particular regulation that are merely the sides of the arc of which Moors slower to arise form at least the unshakable keystone. So there was the legislature in that sense, the real laws. In other words, the first law is the political, what he calls the political laws first, civil law, and then criminal law, and then Moors. And this last one is the real one. It is Moors that are able to shape that what is it revitalize things. Laws can't revitalize. He's saying that the first two, the first one you have to count, you can't contradict. It's just simply that it is political laws, the whole to the whole. The second one is the relationship of what two-sided, each to each citizen to each citizen, the citizens to the whole, and that the relationship should be as minimum dependence on each other in that sense, because that should be no one should be so dependent on the other ones, and that everyone should be and it should have complete dependence on the city, right? The last one is criminal law, right? The sanctions and things like this. But then this third one is the most important one. He says it's only these things by which gain fresh force each day, of which the other laws age out or die, and revive and replaces them, right? Preserves a people in their spirit of institutions, and perceivably substitutes force of habit for that of authority. But notice he says that, but again, I think this is unfair to Montesquieu. This is that weird thing, and it's why ships it, right? Wars are not talked about by political theorists. No, Aristotle does. Aristotle does, and Montesquieu does. Hobbes, well, maybe the other political theorists, right? So he goes, but on the which success all the others depend, right? All the other laws, the other three laws depend upon the mores, a part of which the great legislature attends in secret, while appearing to limit himself to particular regulations that are mere sides of the arches of the mores. In other words, these other things, they appear to be this thing, but these are merely arches on the mores. To particular, in other words, appearing to limit himself to particular regulations, which are merely the sides of the arches of which mores, slower to arise, form at last the unshakable keystone. So that, in other words, the mores create the keystone, they create the reality. So the importance of here is the mores. This is the real secret factor of legislators, the legislator, the ways of life, the customs of the people. Again, this is very much echoing the Aristotelian and the classical view of this. This is, in other words, Rousseau has kind of expropriated the classical view. And the last paragraph here, he says, among these various classes, political laws which constitute the forms of government are the only ones relevant to my subject. So the political laws first, right? And that is the subject that this is relevant to my subject in that sense. The subject of the general will of this, that was the only aspect of that thing. And there's no reasoning, as he says, to it right back here. And the political laws and are called fundamental laws, um, uh, 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 nor without a degree of reason if these laws are not are wise, right? These are the fundamental relationship. Um, um, for if there is only one correct way to organize a state, the people that have found it should abide by it, right? But if it's established order is bad, then why should one accept as fundamental the laws that prevent it from being good, right? But he says, besides, if people want to harm themselves, they do this. That's how he ends the first thing. That's a weird paragraph there. We should reflect, and maybe should have discussed it a little more. But this is how this chapter ends, and the book ends. So that therefore, even though he talks about this, and this is the real support of the legislature, but he said, among the various classes, political laws, not mores, political laws, constitute the form of government and are the only ones relevant to my subject of what has been talked about so far in here. So the legislator seems to be tied with mores ultimately. Yes, some constitutional formation of cities, but the formation of mores. This is a very interesting power thing about Rousseau. It's very thought provoking in that sense. Okay, I'm going to stop here. If you have any comments, questions, please put it below. And if I see them, I will respond to them. So please do it. If you liked it, like it, hit the like buttons, share it with your friends, share it on social media. If you didn't like it, you can say no, but say why in the social media things. In the social media. Don't say it in social media. Well, you can, but say why in the question in the comments. What's wrong? If you have, I'm gonna have to take some pain pills. My tooth. They grill, and it's wearing off now. So it's like, so if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Grow the channel a little more. Um, if you want to follow me and track me on social media, the links are below. If you want to follow my academic social media, the links are below that. If you want to help me, if you want to help contribute to this financially in that sense, you can do so through Patreon or Subscribe Star. Either one is links below. And the other thing you can do is you can buy one of my books. One of the three read books are links below. On that, I want to stop here. I'll let you guys go. Again, this is on Mondays and Wednesdays. We'll do Montesquieu. Next time we meet, we'll be starting book 3, which I think would be a long chapter on this one chapter. So, therefore, take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.